When a homicide happens and the detectives and the police arrive, they shut off, or else they close down the crime scene so that nobody can enter unless they're authorized to. We understand that. They look at fingerprints, they look at blood samples, they look at the corpse, they take pictures. We know how it goes because they've made many movies and many police series on TV showing in general how they operate. Now, of course, those fictive productions for TV, they're dramatized. So there's a lot of sensation in it. But we know that once a homicide happens, they shut down the crime scene. And they keep the crime scene shut down until they've gathered all the necessary evidence. What do they do afterwards? Let's say that it was a young woman that was killed. They're going to look, is she married? If she's married, the husband is going to be their first suspect. They're going to look at ex-boyfriends. They're going to look at whom she had conflicts with recently. But they will also look at the cash flow. Because let's say that this young woman, let's call her Irma. Let's say that Irma died on October the 11th. She was killed then, and that a week before, a relative of hers suddenly changed his spending pattern. Let me say he began to spend a lot of money that the police and the detectives couldn't figure out where that money came from. He only earned around 1100 euros a month, and he spent it like he began to he spent it around 3000 euros within a few days. Now, if you only earn around 1100 euros a month, and like 900 euros has to be spent on your cost of living, then you cannot afford to spend 3000 euros within a few days. So let's say this happened, then the police go notice, hold on a minute. How could this relative of Irma, where did he get the money? And then they're going to the bank. They're going to ask for the they're going to ask for the bank to track the spendings of that relative. And what do they find out? A month before Irma was, he received 8,000 euros from some bank account um, in another state. So they checked out that bank account and they figured out that bank account was of a cafeteria. Now, so the police went to the other state. I mean, the detectives went to the other state to, in cooperation with the local police, to interrogate the owner of that cafeteria. But they found out that the cafeteria indeed had a lot of customers, but that there was no 8,000 euros missing from their bookkeeping. So the police figured out there's money laundering going on. And the owner of the cafeteria confessed that, well, that he had a nephew who was involved in selling meth, crystal meth, and that he permitted his nephew to use his business as money launderer. Then they figured out who's his nephew, and his nephew they figured out was a schoolmate of that relative of Irma. And then they also figured out that Irma used to date that guy. But that Irma left the guy for someone else. And then the police found out that that guy had a motive. So when they checked, when they interviewed the guy, that suspect was dealing in crystal meth, they figured out he had some bruises on his hands. And the bruises were a match to the wounds that were inflicted upon Irma. So they got together, they solved their case. Now, what led to them solving this case? They followed the money. Okay, let me give another illustration. Let's say that um, there is that there has been a fraud that has taken place and people have been scammed. A whole company has been scammed millions of euros. When investigators come, they're going to follow the money. If a company misses around 2 million euros suddenly, of the 30 millions they should have, then they're going to follow the money. They're going to follow the spending habits of the corporation and of the employees also. And then they're going to figure out that there's a pattern over here. Then they realize that every month there was 10,000 euros missing. But also, each of the employees received 100 euros less than they should receive on their wages. So when they notice this spending pattern, and when they notice this financial pattern, they now realize that, hold on a minute, there is a manager that worked at the corporation 5 years ago. He was fired due to sexual misconduct at the workplace. He's now working as a supervisor at some cafeteria kilometers away. But they figured out that this guy that now worked as a supervisor, that all of his children, they drove expensive cars of around 80,000 euros. And they figured out, hold on a minute, when he was a manager at that corporation, he only earned around 40, around 45,000 euros a year. So they thought, hold on a minute, even with the previous job he had, in which he earned more, he wouldn't be able to afford that all those cars for his children. They also figured out that some of those children even had their own companies in foreign nations. But when they tracked the companies, those companies were non-existent. They were registered as legal entities, but the buildings of this corporation weren't there. Then they figured out that it was this former manager that was behind the scam. Follow the money. That is what the police does. Follow the money. That is what detectives do. And even regular people out there, when they follow the money, they'll figure out patterns. And I'm not saying they will always be right in their conclusions, but they definitely find out stuff. Now, that principle in the world of following the money, it's a wise principle in a sense that you do indeed figure things out quicker when you follow the money. Now look, when it comes to the spiritual, people in the world, not all people in the world, because most people in the world, they have no perspective. But those, even people in the world that don't have perspective, they tend to go to worldly people that do have perspective. And worldly people with some perspective, I say some perspective, they follow the money, not only when it comes to finances and monetary issues, they follow the money in the spiritual also. Let me give you an illustration. Um, Jack, I'm using a male example now, is 40. He developed cancer that became, well, the doctor said you have only a few weeks to live. But Jack decided, no, I'm not going to take this. So Jack, who is a Buddhist, went to a Buddhist clairvoyant to figure out what was going on. And when he was speaking with the clairvoyant asked him, Jack, haven't you noticed that about a decade ago, some people suddenly stopped calling you, stopped hanging around you? Then Jack said, yeah, well, some people just lost contact with. Then the clairvoyant told him, Jack, those people that left you, those people had a bad view of you. That placed you in a negative category in their thinking. But because your actual reality did not match their negative expectation, they freaked out. So they didn't want to be confronted with themselves, so they left. But Jack, haven't you noticed that past decades, you often were tired, yeah, you had this fatigue. You often had to miss days at work. Then Jack said, yeah. The clairvoyant told him, Jack, you are the victim of psychic violence. Then Jack was thinking, what? Psychic violence? Jack told the clairvoyant, I'm a Buddhist for almost 20 years. And I also know about mysticism, about symbology, but I never heard about this. The clairvoyant told him, Jack, most of those books you were reading about mysticism is just plain BS. Those were books that were sold just to make money. So they contained like 10% true facts about symbols and 9% was just conspiracy theories. And you've been a Buddhist for almost 20 years, that's true. But you need to understand that the Buddhism you were following is a Western um, a version for people to get relief. So then Jack realized, okay, you're telling the truth. And Jack asked him about this psychic violence thing, what's going on? The clairvoyant told him, Jack, the negative meditation of those people, it generated negative energy that was mediated towards you. And your aura, your energy field received all this heaviness of all those psychic attacks, all that heavy energy coming at you. And your body processed that, all those attacks as fatigue. And it's this tension that eventually caused you to develop cancer. So you have been killed slowly over time. When Jack realized this, Jack thought, and Jack even said to the clairvoyant, you know what, sir? You're telling the truth. Now that I think about it, I began to feel chronic chronic fatigue. But I never thought anything more about it. I just took some pills that the doctor prescribed to me and I kept moving. And then the clairvoyant told Jack, you need to follow the money. And then Jack asked him, what do you mean? The clairvoyant told him, look, the moment you realized that some people were disappearing from around you, you had to begin to ask some questions. Because you, as I can see now, you're not an individual that looks at the bigger picture. You're not someone that notices things quickly. It is now 10 years later, or let me say 11 years and some months later, that you came for help because you were about to die. It's now that I ask you a question and you begin to notice things. Jack, in the world, when when there are mobsters or when there are criminals active, don't people follow the money to figure out a spending pattern to see whether something is incorrect? Then Jack said, yeah, on even on TV series like Crime Scene Investigation or NCIS, they show that. Then the clairvoyant told him, Jack, that's what you should have been doing years back. And you know what? The clairvoyant in this case was right. Jack, because he never looked at the bigger picture, he took a lot of things for granted. Things were happening that should not have happened, and it became it became worse and worse over the years. And well, it caused the physical decay of Jack without Jack even being aware of it. And there's another thing the clairvoyant told Jack, or let me say asked Jack. He said, Jack, haven't you noticed that since you received the diagnosis of cancer, that suddenly people that you haven't spoken to for years began to call you, began to show up in your life? Then Jack said, yeah, there are like two people I can think of. And then the clairvoyant told them, Jack, those are the people that have longed for your doom, those are the people that have invested the most in putting you in a negative daylight. And they're the ones that are so obsessed with their own self-validation that they need you to be in a negative category for them to be relieved. Some of those people even had others turn on them because they were so negative about you. And of course, those people blame you. They are relieved because finally something bad is happening to you. Now they feel relieved because all those years of murmuring gets them some results. Okay, that was the parable. In this case, if Jack would have followed the money, Jack would have realized that, man, something bad is going on. But because Jack was distracted by his career that was going very well, he didn't notice. When a lot of negative meditation takes place, all that waste energy that's released, when it comes together, it forms a dark cloud. It becomes a stronghold. It becomes a concentration of negative energy where demons begin to settle themselves. And then demons get a hold of all of that dark cloud, and demons begin to use that dark cloud in order to have a grip on other people. But understand this: all strongholds needs to be energized. Well, I'm saying better, all strongholds needs to be financed by people's thinking. Because what is financing something? If you finance a business, you energize that business to remain operative. To finance an education means that you empower and energize someone to partake in education. Now, the same thing applies in the spirit realm. Strongholds needs to be energized. And when people are dealing with strongholds, I'm talking about believers now, often they only focus on to be on relief from the consequence of the stronghold. But they don't focus on tearing the stronghold itself. They use prayers, ritual prayers, often prayers that they heard their pastors praying, and once they get some relief, they think it's over. No. Follow the money. If that stronghold is there, who energizes it? Who benefits from it? Often believers don't ask such questions. Now, in the parable I just gave unto you, Jack was smart. He was wise in the terms of the world. Jack went, even though it was in a late stage, he went to look for answers. And he was serious about it. There are, however, believers who are not even, they don't even have the basic wisdom that this Jack had. Now, Jack was a worldly individual. He was lost. He didn't follow Christ. And he was deceived in the little of spiritual insight he did have. But he was practical enough to understand that he needs to find answers. He realized that his situation was not a net normal one. But there are believers who keep holding on to the validation of what some preacher told them or what the church doctrine is. They don't have the basic wisdom that this Jack has. So that's why you have places where believers are plagued year after year and there is no victory, and people even begin to question whether God is with them or not. The issue is they're not in agreement with Christ. They're not operating in obedience to the gospel. Look, when it comes to strongholds, I'm not telling you to be a kind of FBI investigator when it comes to the spirit world, unless you're called by the Most High to do this. Just understand that every stronghold needs to be energized, and no strongholds can remain unless there is a benefit in energizing them. So there are some people, and of course there are demons benefiting from it because demons need that waste energy to operate. But there are people that benefit from the negative situation in some way. It doesn't have to relate to money directly. And those people are going to resist and and lose it once the stronghold is being threatened. That's why when you walk by faith, you're going to encounter enemies. People you don't even know, people you've never interacted with. When they see you for the first time, they can't stand you. Why? Because first of all, they're operating in darkness, so they're uncomfortable about the light that's shining through you. And there's another thing: some of them have demons, and those demons are terrified because you have the power and potential to tear down strongholds. So when those people, they don't have to be aware they have demons, but when those demons inside of them or in their energy field feels threatened, their body feels that sensation. And they associate that sensation with you because it's when they saw you that they felt the sensation. So they can't stand you. Look, it's time to be sober and vigilant, not paranoid and not distracted. Because, well, you need to endure until the end in the faith in order to walk in victory. Well, that being said, be at peace.